You know the commandments: do not commit adultery, do not kill, do not steal, do not render false testimony, do not speak ill of anyone, honor your father and your mother. Mark 10 verse 19, Luke 18 verse 20, Matt 19:19. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land which the Lord your God shall give you. Decalogue, X, 2012. Filial devotion.
The commandment, honor your father and your mother, is a consequence of the general law of charity and love for one's neighbor, for one cannot love one's neighbor without loving one's father and mother. However, the term honor includes an added duty in this regard: filial devotion. In this way, God wanted to show that to love, one must add respect, consideration, submission and acquiescence, which implies that all that charity requires be done regarding our neighbor should be done even more strictly regarding our parents. This duty naturally extends to the individuals who take the place of one's father and mother, and who have even more merit because their devotion is less obligatory. God always strictly punishes all violations of this commandment. Honoring our father and mother does not only entail respecting them, it also means assisting them in their need, providing for their rest in old age, and surrounding them with the care they took of us in our childhood. True filial devotion is displayed especially when parents are lacking in resources. Do persons really fulfill this commandment if they think they have done a great thing for having given their parents only what is necessary for them not to die of hunger, while they deprive themselves of nothing? Or if they relegate them to the worst rooms in the house so that they are not left out on the street, while reserving for their own use what is best and most comfortable? Such parents can even consider themselves fortunate when this is not done out of ill will, and if they are not made to pay for it for the rest of their lives by being put in charge of the housework. Is this the time in their lives when old and weak parents are to be servants of their younger and stronger children? Did their mother make them pay for her milk when they were in the cradle? Did she count the time she watched over them when they were ill, or the steps she took to provide them what they needed? No, children do not owe their poor parents only what is strictly necessary, but also all the little extras possible, in token of the thoughtfulness and the loving care that represent not only interest on what they themselves have received from them, but the payment of a sacred debt as well. This is the only filial devotion accepted by God. Woe, therefore, to those who forget what they owe to the ones who supported them in their weakness, who, besides their physical life, gave them moral life also, and who often imposed harsh privations on themselves in order to ensure their well-being. Woe to such ingrates, for they themselves will be punished with ingratitude and abandonment. They will be struck in their dearest affections, sometimes in their current life, but certainly in another, when they themselves will bear what they made others bear. It is true that some parents do not recognize their duties and are not what they should be for their children. However, it is for God to punish them and not for their children. It is not the children's place to reproach their parents, because they themselves perhaps deserve it to be this way. If charity establishes as a law repaying evil with good, being indulgent toward the imperfections of others, not speaking ill of one's neighbor, forgetting and forgiving wrongs, and even loving one's enemies, how much more do these obligations apply regarding one's parents? Hence, children must take as their rule of conduct toward their parents all Jesus' precepts concerning one's neighbor, and tell themselves that every behavior that would be reprehensible toward strangers would be even more so toward their parents, and that what may be merely a wrong in the former instance may become a crime in the latter, because to the lack of charity one adds ingratitude. God said, "Honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land that the Lord your God shall give you." But why does he promise earthly life as a reward and not heavenly life? The explanation is in the words, "that God shall give you," which, omitted from the modern form of the Decalogue, denatures its meaning. In order to understand these words, one must recall the situation and ideas of the Hebrews at the time in which they were spoken. They did not yet understand the future life. Their view did not extend beyond the corporeal one. Thus, they had to be more strongly impressed by what they could see than by what they could not. That is why God spoke to them in a language appropriate to them, and as if speaking to children, did it in a manner that could satisfy them. At the time, they were in the desert, and the land that God shall give them was the promised land, the goal of their aspirations. They wanted nothing more than that, and God told them that they would live a long time in it, meaning that they would possess it for a long time if they observed the divine commandments. However, when Jesus came, their ideas were more developed. The time having arrived to give them a less material nourishment, Jesus initiates them into the spirit life by telling them, "My kingdom is not of this world, it is there, and not on the earth, that you will receive recompense for your good deeds." With these words, the physical promised land became a heavenly homeland. Furthermore, when he calls them to observe the commandment, "Honor your father and your mother," it is no longer the earth that he promises them, but heaven.
Who is my mother, and who are my brothers? And having arrived at the house, they found such a large crowd of people gathered there that they could not even eat their meal. When his family learned of this, they came to take charge of him because they said that he had lost his mind. Therefore, when his mother and brothers arrived, they remained outside and asked for him to be called. Now the people were seated around him, and someone said to him, "Your mother and brothers are outside calling for you." But he answered them, "Who is my mother, and who are my brothers?" And looking at those who were seated around him, he said, "These are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does God's will is my brother, my sister and my mother." Mark 3 verses 20 and 21, 31 to 35, Matt 12:46-50.
Some of the words used by Jesus seem strange, and they contrast with his goodness and inalterable benevolence toward everyone. Disbelievers never cease to use this as a weapon, stating that he contradicted himself. The undeniable fact, however, is that his doctrine has as its essential foundation and cornerstone the law of love and charity. Thus, he could not destroy on one hand what he established on the other, and we must therefore draw the unbending conclusion that, if some of his maxims are in contradiction with that basic principle, it is because the words attributed to him have been either wrongly conveyed, wrongly understood, or were not his at all. It is understandably a cause for wonder that, in this circumstance, Jesus displays such indifference toward his family and in a certain way denies his own mother. Regarding his brothers, it is said that they never held him in much esteem. Being little advanced spirits, they did not understand his mission. In their opinion, his behavior was bizarre and his teachings did not touch them, since he did not have one disciple from amongst them. It seems that to a certain extent they might even have shared the prejudices of his enemies. The fact of the matter is that they welcomed him more as a stranger than a brother whenever he met with his family, and John states specifically they did not believe in him. John 7 verse 5. As for his mother, no one could question her tenderness toward her son. However, one must also agree that she too seemed not to have had a very precise idea about Jesus' mission, as she was never known to follow his teachings or give testimony regarding him as did John the Baptist. Maternal solicitude was the sentiment that predominated in her. As far as Jesus is concerned, to believe that he denied his mother would be to show ignorance of his character. Such an idea could not have animated the one who said, "Honor your father and your mother." Hence, it is necessary to look for another meaning for his words, which were nearly always shrouded in the veil of allegory. Jesus never wasted an opportunity to give a lesson, therefore, he took advantage of his family's arrival to establish the difference between corporeal kinship and spirit kinship.
Corporeal kinship and spirit kinship.
Blood ties do not necessarily establish ties among spirits. The body proceeds from the body, but the spirit does not proceed from the spirit, because the spirit already existed before the formation of the body. Parents do not create the spirit of their children, they do nothing except furnish them with their corporeal envelope, but it is their duty to aid in their intellectual and moral development to help them progress. Spirits who incarnate in the same family, especially among close relatives, are most often sympathetic spirits, connected by previous relationships that are expressed by their mutual affection during earthly life. Nevertheless, it may also happen that such spirits are complete strangers to one another, divided by previous antipathies that are now expressed as animosity to serve as a trial. Therefore, real family ties are not blood ties, but ties of sympathy and similarity of ideas that connect spirits before, during, and after their incarnations. It thus follows that two individuals born from different parents may be more like brothers through their spirits than if they were brothers through blood. They may attract each other, search for each other and feel happy together, whereas two brothers related by blood may repel each other, a fact attested to every day. This moral problem is one that only Spiritism can resolve by means of the plurality of existences. Consequently, there are two types of families: families through spirit ties and families through corporeal ties. The former are permanent, are strengthened through purification and are perpetuated in the spirit world through the many migrations of the soul. The latter are fragile like matter itself, are extinguished over time and often dissolve morally even in the current lifetime. This is what Jesus wanted to make understood by saying to his disciples, "Here are my mother and my brothers, that is, my family through the ties of the Spirit, because all who do the will of my Father who is in heaven are my brother, my sister, and my mother." His brother's hostility is clearly expressed in Mark's narrative, which states that their purpose was to take charge of him under the pretext that he had lost his mind. Upon being informed of their arrival, and knowing their sentiments toward him, it was natural that Jesus, speaking from a spiritual standpoint, would refer to his disciples as, "These are my true brothers." His mother was with his brothers, and thus Jesus generalizes his lesson, which in no way implies that he meant that his mother according to the body was nothing to him according to the spirit, and that he felt nothing but indifference towards her. His behavior on many other occasions proved quite the contrary.
The Spirit's teachings. Children's ingratitude and family ties.
Ingratitude is one of the most immediate fruits of selfishness. It is always revolting to honest hearts. But the ingratitude of children toward their parents has an even more odious character. It is particularly from this point of view that we will look at ingratitude in order to analyze its causes and effects. In this case, as in all others, Spiritism has come to shed light on one of the problems of the human heart. When the spirit leaves the earth behind, it takes with it the passions or virtues inherent to its nature, and goes into the spirit world either to perfect itself, or to remain at a standstill until it desires to see the light. Some, therefore, depart carrying with them great hatred and insatiable desires for vengeance, but a few of these, more advanced than the others, are allowed to glimpse a bit of the truth. They realize the disastrous effects of their passions, and then resolve to do better. They understand that, in order to reach God, there is one password only: charity. However, there can be no charity without forgetting offenses and wrongs. Neither can there be charity with hatred in the heart and without forgiveness. Next, through an unprecedented effort, these spirits look at those they detested while on earth, but at such a sight, their animosity reawakens. They rebel against the idea of forgiveness and even more against self-denial, especially when it means loving those who perhaps destroyed their fortune, honor, or family. In spite of this, however, the heart of these unfortunate spirits is shaken. They hesitate and waver, troubled by their conflicting sentiments. If the resolution to do better wins, they pray to God and implore the good spirits to give them strength at the most decisive moment of trial. Finally, after years of meditation and prayer, the spirit profits from the use of a body that is to be born in the family of the one it used to hate, and it asks the spirits designated to transmit the divine orders to be allowed to fulfill on the earth the destiny of that body that is about to be formed. So, how will it behave as a member of this family? That will depend on the degree of persistence of its resolution to do better. The constant contact with individuals it used to hate is a terrible trial to which it succumbs sometimes if its will is not sufficiently strong. Thus, depending on whether its good or bad resolution prevails, it will either be a friend or enemy of those among whom it has been called upon to live. This is how one can explain those hatreds, those instinctive repulsions that may be observed in certain children and which no previous act seems to justify. In fact, there is nothing in the present existence that could have caused such antipathy. In order to understand it, one must look to the past. O Spiritists, you must understand humankind's grand role. You must understand that, when you produce a body, the soul who incarnates in it has come from the spirit world in order to progress. Know your duties and put all your love in leading that soul to God. This is the mission that has been entrusted to you, and for which you will receive recompense if you faithfully fulfill it. The care and education you give it will help in its self-improvement and future well-being. Remember that God will ask every father and every mother, "What did you do for the children whom I entrusted into your care?" If because of your fault they have remained behind, your punishment will be to see them among the suffering spirits, when it depended on you for them to be happy. Hence, you yourselves, tormented by remorse, will ask to repair your wrong. You will ask for yourselves and for them another incarnation, in which you will surround them with more enlightened care, and full of gratitude they will surround you with their love. Therefore, do not rebuff the little child who spurns its mother, or those who repay you with ingratitude. It was no accident that made it that way and gave it to you. An imperfect intuition about the past is being revealed, from which you may deduce that one or the other has hated much or has been greatly offended, and that one or the other has come to forgive or to expiate. Mothers, embrace, therefore, the child who causes you trouble, and say to yourself, "One of us was blameworthy." Make yourselves deserve the divine joys that God has bestowed upon motherhood by teaching your children that they are on the earth to improve themselves, to love, and to bless. But, alas, many of you, instead of using education to drive away the innate bad tendencies brought over from previous lifetimes, you maintain and increase them because of a blameworthy weakness or because of negligence, and later on, your heart, ulcerated by the ingratitude of your children, will be for you, starting in this life, the beginning of your expiation. The task is not as difficult as you might think, however. It does not require the wisdom of the world. The uneducated as well as the learned can fulfill it, and Spiritism has come to facilitate it by making known the cause of the imperfections of the human heart. From infancy, children manifest the good or bad instincts they have brought from their previous existence, and it is necessary that we apply ourselves to studying them. All evils have their origin in selfishness and pride, so watch out for the least signs that reveal the seeds of these vices, and take care to combat them without waiting for them to put down deeper roots. Be like good gardeners, who cut off the defective shoots as soon as they appear on the tree. If selfishness and pride are allowed to develop, do not be surprised if you are paid back later with ingratitude. When parents have done everything they should for their children's moral advancement, but are unsuccessful nonetheless, They have nothing to reproach themselves for, and their conscience can rest easy. But as for the very natural heartache they feel from the failure of their efforts, God reserves a great and immense consolation through the certainty that it is only a delay, and that it will be given to them to achieve in another existence the work they began in this one, and that someday their ungrateful children will repay them with their love. God never imposes trials beyond the strength of those who ask for them. He only allows trials that can be completed successfully. Regarding those who do not succeed, it is not because they lack the ability, but because they lack the will, for there are many who, instead of resisting their bad tendencies, take pleasure in them. It is for these that tears and cries of anguish are reserved in later existences. Therefore, admire the goodness of God, who never shuts the door to repentance. A day will come in which wrongdoers tire of suffering, where their pride is finally controlled, and that is when God opens his paternal arms to the prodigal son who throws himself at his feet. Harsh trials, hear me well, almost always indicate an end of suffering and of an improvement for the spirit when they are accepted out of love for God. It is a supreme moment, during which it is especially important not to fail by complaining if one does not want to lose the fruits of such trial and have to start it all over again. Instead of complaining, thank God for offering you the opportunity to triumph in order to award you with the prize of victory. Then, when you leave the whirlwind of the terrestrial world and enter the spirit world, you will be acclaimed like the soldier who has departed victorious from the midst of combat. Of all trials, the hardest are those that affect the heart. Some courageously bear misery and material privations, but yield to the weight of domestic bitterness, bruised by the ingratitude of their loved ones. Oh, what pungent heartbreak that is! However, in such circumstances, what can better display moral courage than an understanding of the causes of evil and the certainty that even if there are long afflictions, despair does not last forever, for God cannot want one of his creatures to suffer eternally. What can be more consoling, more encouraging than the thought that it depends on your own efforts to shorten your suffering by destroying the causes of evil within yourselves? To do so, however, you cannot keep your gaze on the earth and see only one existence. Lift yourselves up and hover in the infinity of the past and the future. Then God's great justice will be revealed to you, and you will wait patiently, because you understand what seemed like monstrosities while on the earth, and the wounds you received there will seem like nothing more than scratches. In that glance cast over the whole, family ties will appear in their true light. They are no longer the fragile ties of matter connecting family members, but the lasting ties of the spirit, which continue and consolidate as they purify themselves instead of being broken through reincarnation. Spirits who have similarities in tastes, moral progress, and affection form families. During their earthly migrations, these same spirits seek one another out in order to group together as they did in the spirit world, and from this, united and homogeneous families are born. And if during their pilgrimages they are temporarily separated, they will find one another later, happy for their latest progress. But since they must not work only for themselves, God allows less advanced spirits to incarnate among them in order to receive counsel and good examples in the interest of their own advancement. These spirits sometimes cause trouble, but that is what comprises the trial, that is where the task lies. Therefore, welcome them as brothers and sisters. Come to their aid, and later, in the world of spirits, the family will be happy for having saved castaways, who, in turn, will be able to save others.
Saint Augustine, Paris, 1862.